They've done this to the Cowboys. They've done this to the Eagles. They've done it to a lot of other teams. It's getting hard to move away from them just being, as we stand right now, when they are healthy, the best team in football.
Yeah, I think we have breaking news. We're going to put the 49ers at the top of your power rankings that release on Tuesday morning. I think that's a
I had been
given on
I
this.
had been wanting to do it. It was one of those things where I couldn't move them. They lost 3 games in a row. I couldn't move them ahead of the Eagles. But at what we've seen of the bye week, I was like, this is going to be somewhere we go. And now, yeah,
I'm excited to
easy
see
money.
where you
We're
go with number two. The Eagles have been
It's tough.
outgained in numerous games in a row. They're just really buttoned up
Yep.
organization that knows how to win football games. So I'm very curious to see where you go with number two, because I think we have number one, and when the 49ers are healthy, they're better than absolutely everyone in this league right now. But they're one injury away from a couple of losses. We saw what happened when they're missing Williams and Debo. But when healthy, they're clearly the best team. Their quarterback is able to maneuver around with the weapons that he has when they're all healthy, and they just are playing so well. And the defense, when not blitzing every single drop back, seems to not give up the big plays as well. So yeah, this again is how good are the 49ers? They're really good.
Yeah, and I do want to. I'm not throwing cold water. Obviously, they are very, very good. But this offense, I think that injury kind of storyline with the 49ers, while true, it was true they were missing some players during that losing streak. It overlooks the fact that that offense was still very good for most of that. For the final 2 games of that 3-game losing streak, that offense was still very good. Brock Purdy was still averaging some absurd number of yards per throw, and the offense was working. They weren't they lost those games because they were turning the ball over and they were in kind of bad situations. And so that still exists for this team. And so that is still something that could come up in a single game. And so that is playoff football. That is the way it works. But yeah, I think that when they're healthy, even when maybe they're missing one person, I still think this offense is. If Debo Samuel goes out again, or if Brandon Ayuk goes out again, I'm not going to. I'm not going to like freak out because that's where their 3-game losing streak happened when they were missing some people because their offense was still really good. They just kind of turned the ball over, and so I don't think that this is as much a difference from what we saw before the bye week. What I will say is the defense. I feel a lot better about the defense now. Obviously, they added some pass rushing help, but I mean, what we've seen from Tre'Varius Ward lately, that secondary, I think we're feeling a lot better with this defense. Tucker, you brought up the Eagles defense, and I want to mention some numbers there with them coming into this game. The 5 weeks prior to this game, the Eagles were 24th in yards per play allowed and 27th in points per drive allowed in the 5 weeks prior to this game. This game obviously didn't help it. They gave up over 8 yards per play to the 49ers. This defense has been a concern for the Eagles all year. It hasn't mattered. They've kept winning. But I mean, this is a giant banner saying, okay, it's time to be very worried about this defense, right, Tucker?
Yeah, I mean, and I actually thought about it this week. What's their signature performance? And they played well against Miami on that Sunday night game. They held Kansas City to 17 points 2 weeks ago, but I mean, for the most part, their front four is still getting home. They're still ranked pretty high in pressures and sacks, but their linebacking core is an issue right now with Zach Cunningham and Nakobe Dean both hurt. And their secondary, I mean, they doubled down this offseason. They cut Darius Slay for like 48 hours and then brought him back. They re-signed James Bradbury and brought him back into the fold. And they bet pretty big on 2 cornerbacks who are over the age of 30, who might, for most teams, be showing signs of slowing down. And so far through the season, those 2 bets look terrible. I mean, Brandon Ayuk was all over Darius Slade today. James Bradbury has been a huge disappointment for most of the season after being one of the best cornerbacks in football a year ago. And now you kind of look at this team, and maybe there are some excuses because they played, 95 snaps against the Bills, last week, and they've played the Cowboys and the Chiefs and the Bills, now the 49ers. They just might be flat out exhausted after running through this gauntlet, but now you get the Cowboys again coming off some extra rest. So it doesn't stop. And yeah, I think if you look at this Eagles team and the way they're built and you want to, point out their flaws and say, this is what's going to keep them from playing in February, it's their defense, right? Because if you're going to progress through the NFC in the postseason, you're going to have to go through San Francisco. You're going to have to go through Dallas. You might have to go through Detroit as well. And right now, the way their defense is playing, it's not good enough to compete with any of those units.
Yeah, and I mean, we also know that they've been winning, they've been winning games of inches recently. I mean, that their defensive numbers could look worse if Jake Ferguson, I believe it was Jake Ferguson that was tackled at the half-inch line, right? Or if Dak Prescott doesn't step out, like those numbers could look worse. And so, yeah, we're sitting here in a very kind of precarious spot for this Eagles team. It is funny that we're like writing their eulogy though, and they're 10-2. Like that's where we
Still
are
the
with
best
them.
record in the
They're
NFL.
Yeah, they're still the number one seed in the NFC. So yeah, we're fine. They do have another big game against Cowboys next week, but then the schedule certainly gets a lot easier from there.